So yes, as Sid mentioned, I'm the executive director of Open Source Hardware Association. And just to let you all know, you are basically looking at OSHWA right here. If you ever wonder, like they seem like a giant organization. It's just us. Also Lee, who runs our summit. Yes! So that is who OSHWA is, in case you're wondering. We also have a wonderful board of volunteer board that gives us their time as well. But if you are curious, like, okay, so this whole OSHWA thing, right? First time we've had a summit in the UK. I don't know if everybody's familiar with us, so I just wanted to let everybody know how it started. It started with this. It started in 2010 with an open hardware summit in New York City. And then we had an annual open hardware summit, and that happened for like 15 years now. Holy cow. So we had this open hardware summit, right? And then we're like, okay, going with this annual thing, right? And then like, I don't know, 5 years later, actually it's maybe more like 6 years later, we had the certification, which was super exciting. I'm going to talk a little bit about the certification. But then, you know, we're like ... like we had the summit, we had the certification, and like, you know, this is OSHWA. So we didn't have a whole lot of other stuff until ... we ended up getting some grant funding for very specific projects. So we were able to run a academia open hardware sort of resources building project, which is about 5 years after the certification. And then we recently got a National Science Foundation grant, which are fantastic to get these grants. Our current grant looks at bringing open source hardware to the medical community. However, both of these things are for very specific things. They are for very, like, it's funding for only that. It's not funding for the summit. It's not funding to make the organization run. It's not funding for everything else to kind of work and move within open source hardware and within what we are hoping to serve this community with. So how it's going, right? So like this past year, what we have done, we had our first ever 24-hour share-a-thon. It was our also first ever Endless Horse Facts. It was also our first ever second Endless Horse Facts and our third ever Endless Horse Facts. And then Endless Horse became a member of OSHWA, which was just really sweet, near and dear to our hearts. Because of you out there, we broke 3,000 certified devices. Now, when we first started the certification, I think we were like, maybe we'll get 50, right? We were like, 50 is a great goal ever, right? So 5 years after the certification's been out or so, we broke 3,000 devices, which is amazing. We launched a new OSHWA website, so it's pretty now. And it's not like just designed by me, because right, when this is your whole team, I'm not a web designer, right? So I had previously designed the website, and now it's like a real website, which is pretty awesome. We began a monthly show and tell, which was Sid's hard work and vision. Also, by the way, the 24-hour share-a-thon was Lee and Sid getting together and being like, we want to stay up for 24 hours. That sounds like a great idea. And so the show and tell has been 7 months running, which is incredible. And then also because of this NSF funding, we launched this Open Healthware initiative. But again, very specific funding only for that project. So that is how it's going, which is really phenomenal when you consider just how tiny we are. And I want to tell you a little bit about the certificate. So I've been using that word a lot up here, and where you're kind of like, okay, wait, you just showed up in the UK. What is the certification you're talking about? So if you're not familiar, just in case, you can go to certificate.oshwa.org, and you can get a certification where we certify that your source is open source hardware, that you've got all the source for your hardware available, and you can certify your device if you fill out a little form, and then you get this stamp, and it comes with a country code and a unique identifier number, and nobody else gets that number. So it's kind of a way to say like, hey, this is my open source hardware, this is the version it is, and this is where it's from. And then what's cool about that is that it creates the open source hardware directory. We're not a repository. We let you keep your files wherever you want them. But we create this directory, and there's different ways that you can filter it. So it's got some data to it, it's got some categories. So you can start seeing like, hey, where's the most open source hardware, and where's what country still needs more open source hardware, and where can I be the first, right? So why would you certify? First of all, it validates and it verifies that all of your source is complete, that it is there, and that it has the correct licenses to be open source. It also creates this directory, which I just mentioned, which has metrics, but it also makes your open hardware discoverable. So people know a one-stop shop to come and search, like, hey, wait, are there any open source hardware sensors out there that I'm trying to build? Are there any open source hardware filaments or perfumes or hammocks? All of those things are in our directory. And so it's also hinged in trademark, which fits into a court system, fits into the current court system's understanding, which we think might be important. So the way that it kind of works is we license that trademark, this one right there, that image to you to be able to say, like, yes, you can use this trademark because you are using open source hardware. So that has a little bit of legal teeth because our community basically told us at the end, hey, there's this problem called open washing, and people are like putting their stuff out there using the words open source hardware as kind of a marketing aspect of saying, like, yeah, my thing's open source, so you want to buy it. But really, that's just kind of open washing, and it's not really open source. And so we need a third body to tell us, like, that everybody is playing on the same playing field, that we all have the same understanding of what open source hardware is. And then, of course, it has some legal teeth to it being a hinged in trademark. So that was just a primer on the certification. But I also want to talk about what your funding makes possible at OSHWA. So we have the summit that you're clearly at. We've mentioned the show and tell. These are just kind of our basic programs right here. We've got the certification, which I've just talked about. We have fellow programs. We have resource creation. So if you go on our website, there's an entire tab of resources, the definition of open source hardware, best practices, all kinds of different things that our community has said, hey, we need this. And also that's how the certification started in the first place, was you all said, hey, we need this. Also general communications and community engagement. And again, we do all this with one employee and 2 contractors. It also plays for the broader education of open source hardware. So a large part of what we do is going out in the world and giving talks about open source hardware, going to universities, letting hackerspaces know what open source hardware is, creating flyers and materials so that open source hardware and that concept can be easily defined and shareable. And doing that, we connect people from around the world who are doing open source hardware through all of our different socials and our Discord and just being here. And then we also, your funding helps upkeep the certification, and it helps pay a living wage to our staff. And that's something we really strive for as a nonprofit, because I think that's something that nonprofits dearly struggle with. So if it seems like we are this little tiny digger digging out this giant ship to be turned around and moved, it feels like that a lot. It is true, right? But this is why we're so grateful to people like you, people who are in this room. This is why we do what we do, because that being that little tiny digger, right? When that ship actually moves of the open source hardware tides, and when industries start changing because they see this concept of open source hardware sort of taking over, there's a lot of work that goes into moving an entire industry, right? But you all make that possible with your membership, with your donations, and you all even, purchasing your summit tickets, all that kind of stuff. You all make this happen, and you all make it possible for us. And just being here, believing in this movement, wanting to be a part of this movement, telling us what you need to forward the movement is all really incredibly helpful to us. And I'd be remiss if I did not mention our sponsors who have really helped us put on this event. Yeah, give them a hand. We've got Hackster, NXP, Drone Code, Pro Squared Network. That icon up there is Rodney Trust. He is our badge designer this year. We've got our Wi-Fi sponsors, Crowd Supply and Open Water, our refreshment sponsors, Spark Fun. We've got Eumorphia, Thing M, Olimex, Pimoroni, sorry. Pulse Sensor, Framework, LDO Motors, Vero Life Sciences, Opulo, WindSource, Arduino, Soldered, SK Electronics Consulting, SVR, OpenHack, Open Source Imaging, and Adafruit. So thank you to all those sponsors who have made this event possible. We really, really, really cannot stress enough that we would not be able to do this without them. But I also just want you to take a look at those companies, right? When we're talking about moving industries and moving massive ships with little tiny diggers, like these are all the companies who already believe that this movement is a real thing, that we are doing open source hardware, they are doing open source hardware. And this slide is just one of 15 years worth of companies who have backed open source hardware. And these companies change from year to year, not all of them, but a lot of them. So there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of support for open source hardware when you look for it. It's exciting. All right, and we have ways to engage with OSHWA. You can connect with us on social media. You can join our Hackster Community Hub. You can certify your open hardware. You can participate in Open Hardware Month. You can become a member. You can just make a donation if you don't want to become a member. Again, those funding mechanisms are incredibly important for our organization to exist. And by the way, all of this information is on the back of your schedule. So if you get home tonight and you thought, you know what, I got to make that donation, I forgot. What's that link again? Don't worry, it's there. All right. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sid.
Just some final thank yous that we wanted to get out there. We are incredibly thank you to Rodney Trusty of Digital Fibers for our badges. Not only did Rodney, I'll let you, because he deserves the cheers. Not only did Rodney take on this project with zero hesitation, he managed all of the design work around how this would work, how it would look. And we know e-textiles are a little fiddly, but the things that he manages to pull off in his mass production of e-textiles, which is a very rare thing in the e-textile market right now, is so incredible. So definitely make sure you're keeping track of Rodney's work. Make sure you keep up with what he's up to. He is Rodney Trusty on Instagram, and you can see lots of great stuff there. We are also very thankful to Dearborn Bliss, Juno Larson, and James Craig for working on our pronoun SAOs. They fully just volunteered their time for that, and we are so thankful. So thank you so much, y'all. And finally, we are so lucky to have had John Gerges on the ground, being able to accept every single package that we sent at him, which was a lot. Folks who were stuffing bags last night, you saw it. It was crazy in there. So I just want you all to take a moment, and with me, we're going to say, thank you, John. All together, 1, 2, 3. Thank you, John. And you'll be able to meet him tomorrow. He'll be around. He was just working today here, actually, doing some biochemistry work. I don't know. We love him. And that is everything. Oh, wait.